The most revolutionary things in our world, they're often hiding right under our fingertips.
Oh, absolutely. All over the place.
Yeah, so today our mission is to take a writing system that you, our listener, probably see every single day, on elevator buttons or ATM keypads or the side of your medicine bottles.
Right. It's everywhere.
Exactly. And we are going to reveal the mind-blowing hidden genius behind it. We're doing a deep dive into this massive dossier on Braille.
Which is such a great topic.
It really is. And I'm telling you right now, it's not just, bumpy letters pasted over the regular alphabet.
Not at all.
What we're actually looking at is the modern era's very first binary code. And the craziest part, it was invented by a teenager.
Yeah, a literal teenager.
Right. So we're covering the history, the mathematical structure, the neuroscience, and sort of the modern global reality of this incredible system.
And I think what's fascinating here is how Braille isn't merely a transcription of print. Like, it is an entirely independent writing system. And as we'll see today, it's a system so robust that it physically rewires how the human brain processes language.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we have to go back to the beginning.
We do. 1824.
Yep. The year is 1824, and our protagonist is a French boy named Louis Braille.
Yeah, so Louis Braille lost his sight as a result of a childhood accident in his father's workshop.
Such a tragic start.
It was. But remarkably, by the time he was just 15 years old, he had developed the core of the tactile code that we still use globally today.
At 15? I mean, what was I doing at 15?
Right. But to really understand the genius of what a 15-year-old Louis accomplished, we have to look at the environment he was in.
Okay, set the stage.
He was a student at the Royal Institute for Blind Youth in Paris, and he was working with an existing system.
Right, a predecessor,
Yeah.
something called night writing, I think.
Yes, exactly. Night writing. It was developed by a man named Charles Barbier, and originally Barbier envisioned this as a tactile code for soldiers.
Oh, for the military.
Yeah, so they could communicate silently in the dark on the battlefield, without needing to light a lantern and give away their position.
That makes sense.
It used sets of 12 embossed dots to encode 36 different sounds.
Ooh.
And Barbier basically brought his system to the Royal Institute thinking, hey, this could be useful for the visually impaired.
Okay, I have to pause on that for a second.
Sure.
Because if you have a functional, established military code, why does a 15-year-old student need to fix it? Like, that seems like a massive leap.
It was a massive leap, for sure. But Barbier's 12-dot system was incredibly clunky.
Really?
Yeah, it had critical flaws when you actually tried to apply it to everyday reading.
Looking at the source material, I was trying to picture reading this 12-dot system, and an analogy came to mind.
Oh, let's hear it.
Trying to read Barbier's code would be like trying to read a massive highway billboard through a tiny peephole.
Ah.
Like the symbol was just way too large.
Mm-hmm. That is a brilliant way to visualize the physiological constraint. And that was actually the first of 3 major critiques Louis Braille had of Barbier's code.
Okay, so what were the other 2? Wait, first, explain the size issue a bit more.
Right, so the 12-dot cell was simply too big to fit under the pad of a single reading finger.
Gotcha.
To perceive the whole symbol, the reader had to physically move their finger around, like up and down.
Which completely destroys your reading speed. You lose all the momentum if you have to scan one single letter like a barcode.
Exactly. And the second major flaw was that Barbier's system was phonetic, not orthographic.
Meaning it only represented sounds.
Right, just sounds, not actual letters of the alphabet. If you're trying to achieve true literacy, you need an orthographic system.
Because you need to know how to spell words.
Yes. You need to spell words, write out specific names, and differentiate between homophones. Reading sounds just isn't enough.
And the third critique?
It completely lacked any symbols for punctuation or numerals. It was purely a battlefield tool.
Okay, so young Louis looks at this and realizes he needs to optimize it for the human fingertip.
He does.
And his solution is the elegant 6-dot cell, a simple 3x2 matrix.
2 vertical columns, each with 3 dots.
Just brilliant.
And by assigning a specific pattern to each letter and incorporating numerals and punctuation, he solved every single problem with night writing. The entire symbol finally fits perfectly beneath the fingertip.
And I mean, the mathematical elegance of this 6-dot matrix is staggering.
Oh, it really is.
Because it's a 3x2 grid and each dot can either be raised or flat, it yields exactly 64 possible combinations.
Yep, 64.
And that includes the combination where no dots are raised, which gives us the space between words.
64 possibilities. And Louis Braille organized them with a highly logical sequence.
Unlike our alphabet.
Exactly. Unlike our printed alphabet, which relies on a lot of arbitrary shapes that don't relate to one another, the Braille alphabet is built in structural stages, or decades as they're called.
Let's trace how that alphabet actually builds on itself, because it's a very clever progression.
Let's take the first 10 letters, A through J.
Okay.
To make these letters, you only use the upper 4 dot positions in the cell. The bottom 2 dots are left completely flat.
So A is just one dot.
Right. A is just the top left dot, B is the top left and middle left dot, and so on all the way through J.
So that basically establishes the foundational shapes.
Precisely. Then, for the next 10 letters, K through T, you take the exact same patterns you just used for A through J.
But you add something.
Right. You simply add 1 dot at the bottom left, position number 3.
Wow.
So if A is the top left dot, K is that same top left dot, plus the bottom left dot.
I was trying to map that out while reading the dossier, and I realized there's a really weird historical quirk here.
Oh, the missing letter.
Yes. If you follow that logical sequence, the letter W completely breaks the pattern. It's entirely missing from its proper place.
Missing W is such a great piece of historical context.
Why wasn't it there?
Well, Louis Braille was French, designing this in 1824. And at that time, the letter W was not a standard part of the official French alphabet.
Oh, of course. So when he built his perfect sequential grid, he just didn't include it.
He didn't need it. He skipped right over it.
That is wild.
The letter W had to be tacked on to the end of the system later on, completely out of the logical sequence, just to accommodate languages like English.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Because of this matrix system with its raised and flat states, Braille is actually the very first binary form of writing developed in the modern era.
It really is.
He published his finalized system in 1837. This teenager effectively created a binary code ones and zeros, raised and flat, over a century before the first digital computers.
It is a remarkable technological leap, and it's highly efficient.
How so?
Because you have those 64 combinations, you can assign multiple meanings to a single cell depending on the context.
Right, let's look at the numbers, because this is where that efficiency really shines.
Go for it.
The first 10 letters of the alphabet, A through J, they pull double duty. They represent the numbers 1 through 9 and 0.
Yeah.
It's an alphabetic numeral system, very similar to how ancient Greek or Hebrew numerals work, where letters just double as numbers.
Exactly. And to make that work, without confusing the reader, the system uses formatting marks.
Like a shift key.
Basically, yeah. The Braille cell for the letter A doesn't change. But if you place a special number sign cell right before it, it tells the reader, hey, shift your context. We're doing math now, not spelling.
Okay, but if you have this brilliant 64-character code, printing it out, dot by dot, must take an incredible amount of physical space. Like, paper has limits.
Oh, it takes up a massive amount of space.
I can imagine.
A standard page of Braille paper is 11 by 11.5 inches.
Pretty big.
And on that entire page, because the dots need distinct physical separation so the finger can actually read them, you can only fit 25 lines.
Wow.
With a maximum of 43 Braille characters per line.
That's nothing. You would literally need a wheelbarrow to carry around a single novel.
You really would. So to save space and increase reading speed, Braille naturally evolved into a form of shorthand.
Okay.
This is where we get the distinction between uncontracted and contracted Braille.
Right. I saw that in the source text.
Yeah, so uncontracted Braille is literal, letter-by-letter transcription. You usually see this used by beginners or on basic household labels where space just isn't an issue.
But contracted Braille is what you use when you actually need to read at speed, right?
Yes. Contracted Braille introduces ligatures and abbreviations.
Give us an example.
Well, a ligature in this context is when multiple letters are grouped together into a single symbol. It uses single Braille characters to represent common letter combinations like she, or and, or even entire words.
The examples in the dossier really illustrate how much space this saves.
They're pretty stark.
Take the word afternoon, which is 9 letters long in print. It gets compressed down to just 3 characters in contracted Braille. A-F-N.
Yep, AFN means afternoon.
And there was another one. If you take the letter M and you put a specific single ... 5 right before it, the combination becomes the entire word mother.
It's incredibly efficient.
Yeah.
But it requires a significant amount of memorization from the reader.
I bet.
But the trade-off in reading speed and paper conservation is just enormous.
But how do you actually write it? I mean, before modern printers, the traditional method is the slate and stylus. And the analogy I kept thinking of for this tool is carving a rubber stamp.
Oh, walk us through the rubber stamp analogy. I like that.
Well, if I carve a rubber stamp, I have to physically carve the letters backwards into the rubber.
Right.
That way, when I press it down into ink and stamp the paper, the final image reads forwards from left to right.
Makes sense.
Writing with a slate and stylus works the exact same way. You are clamping a piece of paper in a metal frame and punching the dots down into the paper with a stylus.
Pushing them through.
Right, which means the raised bumps, the parts you actually need to read, are being formed on the underneath side of the page.
Which forces the writer to completely reverse their spatial orientation.
Exactly. You have to write everything backwards, moving from right to left, creating a perfect mirror image of the cell. Just so that when you unclamp the paper and flip it over, the words read normally from left to right.
It takes tremendous spatial awareness.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. Which is why the evolution of Braille writing machines was such a massive game changer for accessibility.
And that brings us to the mechanical era.
Right. The first Braille typewriter to gain general acceptance was the Hall Braille writer, introduced in 1892.
Okay, late 1800s.
Then came the Stainsby mechanical writer in 1903, which actually featured a sliding carriage that moved over an aluminum plate.
Very industrial.
But the absolute icon of this world is the Perkins Brailler.
The Perkins.
Yes, created in 1951 by a woodworking teacher named David Abraham at the Perkins School for the Blind.
Oh, wow.
It is an incredibly durable, purely mechanical machine with 6 keys, one for each dot in the cell, plus a spacebar.
And technology hasn't stopped there, obviously. The sources mention we've even moved beyond the 6-dot cell to an 8-dot system for modern computing.
Yes, 8-dot Braille adds 2 extra dots at the bottom of the cell.
Why do they need 2 more?
This was developed specifically for refreshable Braille displays connected to computers. Those 2 extra dots allow the cell to encode every single printable ASCII character.
Oh, ASCII being the standard text characters a computer uses to communicate.
Exactly. It also allows capitalization to be indicated within a single cell, rather than requiring a separate formatting mark like we discussed earlier.
Okay, but wait. If you have to physically feel each of these dots, one at a time across a page, how could anyone possibly read fast enough to make this useful?
It seems impossible, right?
Yeah. Because if I read a printed book, my eyes are taking in entire words or sentences at a glance. Feeling one letter at a time seems like a massive biological bottleneck.
It would be if the brain processed tactile information purely as isolated sensory data.
But it doesn't.
No, the human brain is highly adaptable. It
Yeah.
doesn't read CAT and then put it together. It chunks the data.
Chunking.
Right.
Right.
When a proficient Braille reader touches the page, their brain is recognizing digraphs, which are pairs of letters that create a single sound, like S, H, or CH, along with common roots and suffixes, and it processes them as singular concepts.
So they aren't feeling individual letters, they are feeling the shapes of whole concepts.
Exactly. And the mechanism for how the brain does this is stunning.
This is the neuroscience part.
Yes, functional MRI scans show that this tactile processing largely bypasses the standard somatosensory cortex.
Wait, the part of the brain that normally processes touch?
Yes, instead of processing it there, the brain routes this tactile information straight to the visual cortex.
Wow. So even without physical sight, the brain is using its visual processing hardware to see the shapes of the words through the fingers?
Yes, it is a profound example of neuroplasticity. The brain literally repurposes its own architecture based on how information is gathered.
That is incredible. But that brings us to a harsh reality we have to discuss in this deep dive.
The literacy cliff.
Yeah. The data in our dossier points to a severe drop in Braille literacy in recent decades, often referred to as the literacy cliff.
Right.
And it seems to stem from a major structural shift in the U.S. educational system. In 1973, the Rehabilitation Act integrated thousands of blind children out of specialized schools for the blind and mainstreamed them into local public school classrooms.
Yeah, and the intention of mainstreaming was focused on equal access, in integrating students with their sighted peers.
Which makes total sense on paper.
It does. However, it had an unintended consequence, because while the students moved, the specialized educational resources didn't always follow them.
Right.
Mainstream public schools, suddenly tasked with accommodating these students, often just could not afford to hire or train specialized Braille-qualified teachers.
So you've got a blind student sitting in a mainstream classroom, but they lacked an instructor who could actually teach them their primary medium of reading and writing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the data reflect right.
Yeah.
Compare that to an employment rate of just 33% for those who do not know Braille.
So what does this all mean for the individual? It means Braille is as essential to the visually impaired as print is to the sighted.
Absolutely.
It is the absolute foundation of true literacy.
Which is why the system's ability to adapt globally is so vital.
And that brings up a massive logistical puzzle.
It really does.
Because if the cognitive process is this deeply tied to spelling and syntax, how does a code built on the French alphabet translate to the rest of the globe?
Right.
If I take a French A, does it mean A in German? And what about languages that don't even use the Latin alphabet?
This is where international cooperation really shines. In 1878, there was an international congress held in Paris.
Okay.
They recognized that if every country just mapped Braille onto their own alphabetical order, a blind person from France wouldn't be able to read a single word in Germany or Russia.
Right. It would isolate readers completely based on their geography.
Exactly. So they reached a brilliant consensus. Mapping would be based on phonetics, the actual sounds, rather than alphabetical order.
Okay, so if I look at the Greek alphabet, the letter gamma makes a G sound.
Right.
So in Greek Braille, gamma is written using the exact same dot pattern as the Latin letter G, even though gamma is the third letter of the Greek alphabet, and G is the seventh letter in ours.
Exactly, because a sound is a sound regardless of the visual alphabet.
That's so smart.
In Russian, the sound D is mapped to the Latin C, because in Slavic languages using the Latin alphabet, C makes that T sound.
Oh, I see.
This acoustic mapping transcends visual borders, saving a blind reader from having to learn a completely new dot matrix logic for every country they visit.
But the linguistic gymnastics get even wilder when you look at Asian languages.
Oh, definitely.
Because those languages operate on fundamentally different structures. When we look at Cantonese, for example, the meaning of a Braille character completely changes based on its position in a syllable.
Yes.
Our sources describe it splitting syllables into an onset and a rhyme. So an onset would be the initial sound of the word, like the C in cat.
That's correct. And the rhyme is the rest of the syllable, the vowel, and any final consonants, the at in cat.
Okay, got it.
In Chinese Braille, the exact same dot pattern can mean two entirely different things depending on whether it's functioning as the onset or the rhyme.
Give me an example.
Well, the Braille cell for the Latin letter K represents the K sound at the start of the syllable. But if you place that identical cell at the end of the syllable as the rhyme, it represents the sound ek.
That requires an incredible level of contextual awareness from the reader.
It really does.
And Japanese Braille does something totally different, combining vowels and consonants into a single cell, which the dossier refers to as an abugida.
An abugida, right.
Essentially, an abugida is a writing system where consonant-vowel sequences are written as a unit rather than as separate letters.
Right.
So instead of a dot pattern for K and a separate dot pattern for A, there is just one cell that means ka.
It just proves the absolute genius and flexibility of Louis Braille's original 3x2 matrix.
Truly.
I mean, it is flexible enough to accommodate 133 different languages.
But let's ground this back in our daily reality. You mentioned earlier that Braille isn't just in books.
No, not at all.
In fact, our sources note that only about 1% of printed books are actually translated into hard copy Braille.
Which is why everyday access integrated into our infrastructure is so vital.
Yes.
In the UK, it is a legal requirement for medicines to have the name of the drug in Braille on the packaging.
I love that.
In Canada, passenger safety rules on planes and trains must be available in Braille.
And let's talk about money. Currency is such a tactile thing anyway, but several countries have baked Braille and tactile elements right into the design.
The euro is a great example.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the euro coins were designed in direct cooperation with organizations representing the blind. They incorporate specific milled edges and weight differences so they can be distinguished by touch alone.
And in Canada, they use tactile dots on their polymer bills to indicate the value, so you don't even have to read a number, you just count the full Braille cells.
It's so seamless.
I also didn't know this, but in the U.S. back in 2003, the Mint issued an Alabama state quarter featuring Helen Keller.
Oh, right.
And it actually had her name stamped right onto the coin in Braille.
That's awesome. You know, if we connect this to the bigger picture, what all these examples illustrate is a fundamental principle of accessibility.
Which is?
Good design for the visually impaired, like tactile currency or clear raised elevator buttons, is ultimately good, intuitive design for everybody. It just makes the physical world more navigable.
We have covered a massive amount of ground
Okay,
today.
really have.
We started in 1824 with a 15-year-old French boy who looked at a clunky military code and realized it didn't fit the human fingertip.
Right, and we explored the mathematical perfection of the six-dot matrix, the evolution from uncontracted basics to rapid-fire shorthand, and the sheer spatial genius required to carve it backwards with a slate and stylus.
We looked at the neurological magic of the visual cortex taking over touch processing, the vital link between Braille literacy and employment, and how acoustic mapping allowed a simple binary system to support 133 languages globally.
It's everywhere.
It is hiding in plain sight on medicine bottles and the coins in our pockets.
It is a remarkable legacy.
Yeah.
But I want to leave you with a thought to mull over, building on what we've discussed today.
Let's hear it.
We live in an era increasingly dominated by smoothed glass screens and voice assistants. A frictionless audiovisual world.
Sure.
But given how deeply tactile reading engages the brain,
Right.
literally rewiring the visual cortex and driving true literacy, we have to ask, as physical texture disappears from our modern information diet, what essential cognitive connections might the rest of us be losing?
Wow. Are we losing our grip literally on how we process information?
Exactly.
Something to think about the next time you swipe a flat piece of glass. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Next time you step into an elevator or grab your medication, take a second. Look closer at that tactile world right under your fingertips. There's a whole universe of binary genius waiting there. Catch you next time.